Hello, and welcome to the Iaconian Archives. I am the archivist, your host and reader. In this episode, I will be sharing an excerpt from Someone to Trust by author redseeker, a tale of Starscream defecting to the Autobots from the Transformers Prime universe. So pour yourself a glass of Injex, get comfortable at your console or in your berth, close your optics, and let's enter the archives. Feeling a bit like a protoform sneaking energon cookies from the jar, Optimus entered a set of coordinates into the terminal and opened up the ground bridge. This was a spot he had found quite by accident on the human application, Google Earth, a few days earlier, and he had made a note of the coordinates. At the time, he hadn't had a plan in mind, but perhaps subconsciously he was already thinking of an outing just like this. He gave Starscream a small, reassuring smile and stepped through the portal. They emerged onto a high mountain ridge beneath an arcing, star-studded sky. The path was rough and only just wide enough for a bot to walk, and the almost sheer drops on either side promised a painful death to anyone but an aerial. Starscream took a few steps into the night and gazed around with a guileless smile on his face. Optimus paused to watch how the stars reflected in Starscream's glossy armor. "I do not anticipate any trouble from the Decepticons," he told Starscream. "This location is remote, and there are no energon deposits nearby. Even so, we should not linger too long." "I'm not afraid," said Starscream. He wandered further, picking his way carefully across the rocky terrain with his delicate peds. Optimus followed behind with a more steady tread. He didn't want to crowd Starscream, even though here the aerial was in his element. He could fly away from Optimus and never see him again, or unbalance him with a shot and send him rolling down the mountainside. Starscream must have instinctively figured that out as well, because his body language became looser as he walked, and he started to stand up straighter. Optimus admired the sheen of moonlight on the smooth planes of his wings and the ergonomic design of his frame. He had a distant memory of seeing the Vosgian prince before the war, from afar. Starscream had been bulkier then, more like a typical seeker, and his armor had blazed with color. His frame had been pared back since then. The sacrifices he had made in pursuit of speed had left him incredibly vulnerable, a fact he was uncomfortably confident Megatron took advantage of. The thought of Megatron's fists and claws finding those thin wing plates and exposed cables made a fierce protective instinct rise within Optimus's spark. It was the same way he felt about all his team, or at least that's what he told himself. "It's pretty high up here for a grounder," said Starscream. "Aren't you afraid you'll fall?" He turned and gave Optimus a crooked smile. Optimus tripped and barely caught himself before he could tumble head first off of the mountain. Starscream snickered. He walked backwards, fully facing Optimus now, and said, "Careful. I can't guarantee I'll be able to catch you, and then where will we be? Your Autobot friends will think I assassinated the mighty Prime." "They will come around in time," Optimus said gently, having recognized the real anxiety behind Starscream's flippant joke. "Every day you prove yourself more worthy of their trust." "Trust?" Starscream's expression faltered and he turned away. "I doubt I will ever do enough to win some of them over. They want me to be repentant, to be eaten up by remorse for my actions. It's true, I've made mistakes, but I won't hate myself for the choices I've made. We've been at war for millions of years. There isn't a bot among us who hasn't done terrible things, and anyone who says they haven't is a liar." Optimus came closer, approaching carefully as though Starscream were a wild animal who might lash out if he moved too suddenly. "Even you, oh great Prime," Starscream spat. Optimus cycled a deep breath. "Would you like to take a flight?" he said. Starscream spun around. "What?" Optimus knew the aggression crackling in Starscream's field and displayed in the wide flare of his wings was a misplaced response to vulnerability. Optimus doubted any Decepticon was used to overtures of friendship or goodwill, Starscream perhaps least of all. He thanked the Matrix for blessing him with the insight to see a damaged mech in need of help and the patience to treat him kindly despite the small rewards. "The sky is clear, and we cannot be certain when you will have another chance," he said. "What makes you so sure I won't just fly back to the Nemesis?" "That is the thing about trust, Starscream," Optimus said gently. "In order to win it, you must first give it. I am trusting you to stay true to the decisions you have made and the new direction you want your life to take. In return, I hope you can learn to trust that I have your best interests at Spark. I have noticed how hard you work. You do not need to do anything else to win me over." He didn't say any more. Starscream already looked discomfited enough, and he worried laying it on too thick would just drive him away. After scrutinizing him with a suspicious glare, Starscream glanced back up at the sky. His wings flexed, perhaps unconsciously. Then, seeming to have reached a decision, he threw a grin at Optimus and said, "Watch this." He took a running leap off the steepest side of the ledge, transformed gracefully, and swooped up into the air an instant before he could crash into the rocks below. Optimus felt an upsurge of joy watching the Seeker's bold, upward arc. Starscream shot into the sky and then flowed straight into an elaborate and showy series of turns, dives, and rolls, almost too fast for Optimus to keep track of. Starscream's joy at finally being back in the air was obvious in the way he flew, and Optimus felt no small amount of pleasure at having been the one to facilitate that happiness. After playing in the air for a while, Starscream jetted away until Optimus could no longer see him. Optimus reminded himself of his own words and only hoped the jet didn't get picked up on Decepticon sensors and attract unwanted attention. He sat down on a jutting outcropping of rock and waited for Starscream to return. "You're too trusting," Ratchet would tell him. He'd been burned before, befriending the wrong mech, and ought to know better. But Optimus would rather give every bot a chance he didn't deserve before letting bitterness and fear close off his spark to those who needed a friend, even if it cost him. Starscream was not Megatron. Starscream was his own mech with his own goals and motivations, and if he couldn't claim to know all the workings of the Seeker's mind, he did trust that, for now, Starscream's aims aligned with Optimus's. The horizon was just starting to lighten when Optimus heard the whine of jet engines and looked up to see Starscream arrowing across the sky towards him. He performed a little roll before transforming and landing with a flourish. His fans were roaring and his optics were bright with exertion. There was a smile on his face that had nothing to do with scheming and conquest. His armor sparkled in the pre-dawn light, and Optimus felt the heat of his frame from several feet away. Standing, Optimus offered his hand. "Shall we return?" "Better get back before the doctor gets suspicious, do you mean?" He didn't take Optimus's hand, but he did follow him back to the open ground bridge. "You read my mind," Optimus said as he and Starscream entered the bridge side by side. You can find this story posted in its entirety at archiveofourown.org, along with nearly 40,000 original Transformers transformative works. Give it a read and let the author know what you thought. Comments and kudos encourage authors to keep producing their art. Please subscribe to this channel and you'll know when new videos are posted. As always, comments and suggestions are welcome below. If you would like to suggest a story or a selection from a longer fanfic for reading here on the Iaconian Archives, please view our video from the archivist suggesting content, and you could hear me read some of your favorite Transformers fanfiction. From tonight's author and myself, thank you for your time and support.